The tape is in the, I got tape in my pocket somewhere? Oh, right here. Okay. Yeah, we're walking past businesses. Oh boy, so much is going on. And I just left Orlando's restaurant. Brian Benjamin is having a fundraiser. So
that's right. That's right. Yeah, I saw that was going on. Yeah.
Yep, it's tonight. So I stopped by to show my love. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Just really quick, I just want to say thank you to the whole neighborhood association, all the work that you guys do. It's just incredible. The civic engagement. Oh, my daughter popped in the screen. There's Avery.
Sure. There she goes.
So,
what's up, young lady?
Actually, I'll take the background down. It is cold, Mima. So yeah, that's us right now.
Oh, and the dog.
Yeah, and the dog. We got the whole thing going on. Ariel, where are you, buddy? There you go, buddy. There you go. So yeah, so we're really doing a family thing right now.
Nice, nice. Nice. You got about 10 people on already. My part starts at what time?
So we're thinking maybe in like 5 minutes or something. Does that work for you, William?
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay.
Nope. I had one there. Someone took it down. See, that was mine.
We're seeing the underbelly of retail politics when you're talking about posters being removed.
Yeah. You got some haters when they see that you're doing well. All of a sudden, you know, the space becomes at a premium. And I tell my team, do not touch anybody else's posters. In fact, tape it back up and help them. So we want to create the right energy.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And it's always amazing to me when you see businesses and they've got, you know, 4 or 5 posters for the same race on their windows.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, we're out here.
So, Rasan, I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions since I've got you on. How is Citizens Committee doing in this kind of crazy time, and where are you sort of, you know, positioning the organization for the post-COVID recovery?
You can put it inside, paper from the back.
Yeah, no, this is a great question. So first and foremost, you know, our mission allows us to be ready for this moment. Thank God the foresight was, if people come together, you can improve neighborhoods, and if neighborhoods are improved, New York City can improve. And so, you know, our crisis resistant mission is helping us in this moment. And what we do is we provide support for the ideas that come from leaders across the city. And what I can tell you is, you know, at one point where we got 50% beautification requests and then 50% other, it's flipped where, you know, 80% of our requests are for like basic needs and how folks are coming together for folks in the midst of this crisis. And then the other 20% are, you know, beautification and mental health.
Excellent. And what kinds of projects have been sort of coming in? Like, what do you see, like food pantry things, or, you know, community fridges, or what are the sort of things that are most pressing that you've seen requests for?
No, I mean, you're naming it. So for our last round of grants, and I apologize, my puppy's going crazy. Our number one issue area was food and healthy living. And that was more than double the number 2 like request. So folks are, you know, using community gardens and giving out food there and growing food there. Their community fridges, all the stuff that you're thinking about, mutual aid. I went to go visit Sunshine Garden in the Bronx recently, and they have a community garden, a lot of, you know, old Latinas go there, but they get a food delivery like once a week and are giving out boxes of food in the midst of that garden. So it's kind of incredible, and how sad how a lot of New Yorkers, like, having food security is within doubt, but that's real, and we're figuring it out by a lot of our asks. After that, the number two number of requests we got was around youth engagement. So you're thinking about how kids have been out of school or haven't had the chances to have kind of like healthy living and healthy activities for youth. We're definitely getting a lot of requests for that. But we're just really happy that there's a lot of diversification and what people are asking for. And a lot of the same folks that were asking us for money for community gardens are asking us for assistance for like mask and PPE, or asking us for assistance to help them give out food in those same gardens. So we're seeing a little bit more of the whole authentic people who've been asking us before. So our relationships are getting even deeper with our grantee partners.
Yeah, that's great. I think, when we look back 2 years ago or whenever, we certainly see that, it was a time when people were mostly focused on, as you said, the beautification efforts. And now it's great to see that the communities have pivoted. I mean, it's bad to see that there's the need, but it's good to see that the organizations that are reaching out to you are pivoting, and you're not still getting, it would be pretty depressing if you were still getting 80% beautification grant requests.
No, that's right. And the thing too, though, is we started a program that does neighborhood business assistance. And so we got small micro grants for neighborhood businesses that focused in on people of color led, women led, and immigrant led businesses. And because we recognize like economic vitality is really important for the city. And, talking about volunteerism within the context where folks can't even provide for themselves is a little bit, putting the cart before the horse. So I think any act that, is radical, like I'm staying and I'm thriving and I'm surviving, I'm providing jobs, I'm maintaining culture, and I'm providing services in my community. Like those are the things that we're really focused on making sure that we are there to highlight, because our grants aren't huge. But what we can be is a big platform to connect our grantee partners to stakeholders, to politicians, and to the larger conversation that New York City is having about thinking about what the future is going to be. Awesome.
And just before we pivot to William, for those people who have just joined, I know Citizens Committee and have known Citizens Committee for well over a decade now. But there are obviously many people on this call that may not be so familiar with your organization, you and what you do and how you've pivoted and this sort of thing. So do you think you could give us maybe a 5-minute pitch on your wonderful organization? Because you never know who in a meeting you're going to touch, and they'll tell their person or their friend or their neighbor who will apply for a grant or get assistance from you. So I think this is a great way to meet people that weren't necessarily expecting to encounter Citizens Committee, but suddenly you've got a captive audience. So go for it.
Well, thank you. Dr. Rasan Harris here. If you look at my name, it is citizensnyc.org is our website. So remember, nothing else. Visit the website and you can be connected to us forever. Citizens Committee, founded 1975 when the city was in crisis. Oz Elliott, Marietta Tree, Jacob Javits were some of the founders. That said, when Ford basically said to the city, drop dead, that they said, well, we're not going to drop dead. We're going to roll up our sleeves and make this city thrive and survive through the crisis. And in those times, Oz Elliott was the deputy mayor for economic development, and they got brooms and they went to the ballot box and they supported all these different initiatives to make sure that New York City survived. Well, 45 years later, I just happened to be selected as the first Black CEO of the organization. And it just so happened that we're back at our founding story of crisis. In that moment, my first day was March 16th. My daughter, who's right here, she was out of school. And my first day was Zoom, and jumped on the first Zoom meeting I was in. And we just got to work, and we continue to do what we always do, which is make micro grants to organizations, and not even just full 501c3 organizations, but people who are doing work, coming together to improve New York City. And so our grants, as Sean has said before, had been a lot of community gardens and block associations, but they've also done with critical issues that are in New York City. And we continue to do that work. And as I was saying a little bit earlier, people who showed up before for their block association or their community garden have showed up to us and said, hey, we're also taking care of the older adults in our community. We're also giving out food. We're also thinking about like how to get people to be safe as we're trying to figure out how to come back and bring New York City back. Easily go to our website, and we have 2 applications open, one for our neighborhood business grant making program, which is newer, that are for, like, as I said before, prioritizing people of color led, women led, and immigrant led businesses to make sure that they can thrive and adapt to this new moment. And then we have our traditional neighborhood grants that we're calling them the all-in neighborhood grants, that are for any group of folks that come together to solve a problem. Last year, we gave away over $1 million to over 400 groups in 2020, and we're looking to do more of the same as we go forward. And right now, we're in the midst of our New Yorkers for New York campaign, where we're asking people to give of their time, talent, and treasure to make sure that we can continue to make grants. We give what we, collect. And so the more that folks who can contribute will be a blessing to other New Yorkers. So that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. And thank you again for this opportunity. And we're just really excited, in particular in this season where we're picking leadership and figuring out who's staying with New York City, to look at different candidates and kick the tires and make sure that we all get out there so that we can make sure that New York City is just and equitable for everyone, even little daughters who want attention when you're talking.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. And it's important for neighbors to be aware that Rasan's organization, Citizens Committee, has in the past funded a couple of programs in our community that have really benefited. So if you've ever noticed the beautification of the tree pits along 125th Street, Madison Avenue, Park Avenue, et cetera, that is money that came directly from Citizens Committee in a micro grant a number of years ago. Additionally, Uptown Grand Central, one of the pivotal organizations in our community, has benefited from assistance from Citizens Committee, in particular, some of the painting murals that you see on the security shed. That shed that they used to store has been painted with money from Citizens Committee, et cetera. So they've been here for years, and they've really made a difference with helping to organize neighbors to help out. And Rasan is a neighbor of ours who lives on 131st Street. And as I told him when I first heard that he moved in, that that particular block is important for Black history and the Black history of Harlem, because William Payton, who was one of the real estate proponents of selling and renting to Black Americans in the early part of the 20th century, lived on his block. And so essentially, without Payton performing this role, Harlem may not be Black today. It may have just had a completely different trajectory. And part of the reason we are all here in the way that we're here is because of the efforts of that man to bring better housing to Black New Yorkers who were struggling at that time in San Juan Hill, and the racism that they were encountering with their experience with Irish Americans in particular at the turn of the 20th century. Okay, enough history. We now are going to pivot to the elections. And as you know, over the course of the last 5 months or so, we've been having a number of candidates, both for citywide and also local elections, come and speak to us and give us a sense of who they are, their visions, and answer our questions. And it gives me a great pleasure to introduce a candidate for City Council for District 9, William Allen, who is on this call and has been campaigning fiercely this afternoon. He and I have been in conversation for a long time now. I've met him through Zoom and in person, but it's always been masked. So I'm looking forward to just having a conversation with him now. William, I just want to confirm you're there.
I'm here.
Okay, so perhaps you could introduce yourself and why you're running and your vision for District 9, and then we'll open it up to questions if that's okay.
Thank you. And please forgive me for not showing my face. I'm up here walking through the community, and so it might my image might be bouncing around if I showed you me in real time. So I apologize. But with this campaign, door to door and touching voters directly, close to 200 to 500 people a day is paramount to a victory. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm running largely because the last cycle, Harlem has not had adequate nor effective representation in the city council. Our current rep, unfortunately, was ranked 51 of 51. He served on no committee whatsoever. And therefore, his time there has minimum positive impact for us. I believe that my background, I don't want to go into all my bio, but I believe that I have the experience and the credentials matched by passion and competency makes me a very good choice for the seat. I've been district leader of the area that you now sit in. I've been a district leader since 1999. From there, I helped to organize progressive delegation judicial convention, put more Black, brown, women, LGBTQ on the court, on the bench here in New York County. I also had served as, okay, I'm getting a little lost here now. What streets? Okay. I also served as the executive director of the Democratic Party for Manhattan. Did that for a few years. I'm the last county chief of a board of elections in the state of New York. I did that for nearly 4 years and was able to change the direction of the current operation in Manhattan. Was able to get more young people involved in the process and more in community engagement and education. I firmly served as the president of the local school board in Harlem. There was 27 schools. I did that before I turned 21. And when I was a young teenager, I became the first teenager appointed to any community board in the history of the city. And I've ran nonprofits. I helped to start Harlem Churches for Community Improvement, along with my late pastor, Reverend Dr. Preston Washington. We were able to secure a budget from the city of New York in the tune of $250 million that built new housing and revamped housing from 139th Street to 155th Street along the Frederick Douglass corridor. And so that's pretty much my background. There's a lot more I could probably share. That's all on my website, but that's really my focus. My focus is around equity and justice. And right now, as you mentioned Philip Payton earlier, it's almost like there's a reverse situation where African Americans in particular and most middle income people are being pushed out of Manhattan.
And William, that brings up a very important issue, which is affordability and affordable housing. Can you give us a sense of some of the ideas, plans, and thoughts you have on how you can help make New York City and Harlem in particular continue to be affordable to the people who live here?
Well, the Chief Housing Agency and the city administration is HPD. And there needs, just like we've been talking about, well, many people have been talking about the defunding of the police department. We need to look at all the major critical agencies that have an impact on our lives. And HPD, the housing agency, needs to be critically looked at to meeting the objective of making sure that this is a diverse city and that it's affordable. I mean, that should really be the goal of HPD, because if you're already wealthy, I don't know if you need government subsidies, but certainly if you want to keep the middle class and the working class in New York, you really got to give some assistance. I mean, that's what built Co-op City. That's what built Esplanade Gardens in Harlem and Riverbend and 1199 Plaza. All these middle income co-ops was built with government support. And HBD for New York City served that role.
Fantastic. And so I'd like to just open it up now. If you could use Zoom to raise your hand, you can do that within the reactions.
Up to you.
I think, or just simply unmute yourself and feel free to ask a question or put it into the chat.
You can't type. What is it?
I want to get it that one so far.
So.
Let me get it.
Halia, do you have a question to get us going?
Or I can start with a question. All right. I'm more focused on education for our young people in the future. So is that going to be part of your goal as well, to determine or figure out a way to improve our public school system in Harlem particularly?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. I'm concerned about the public school system in Harlem, and I wanted to know what is your position on, how we can improve the public school system. Are, children are going back into the buildings. What is your stance on how they're going back safely or not? What do you see for the future for our children in Harlem?
Well, one, when I was president of the local school board in Harlem, there was greater community involvement and oversight. Now, when you ask folks who are not parents, who are not involved, they don't have a clue about what's happening in our schools and whether or not kids are safe. There has to be something put in place that we as a community can really begin to monitor better public education in our community, and also give parents the needed advocacy and support when they send their children to these schools. I don't like the separation of public schools from public charter schools. I believe both groups need to be encouraged to come together and maybe also share resources and ideas. And so one of the things I propose is a collaborative council between regular public schools and charter schools and even private parochial schools in Harlem, where all the parent groups come together and share ideas and also work collaboratively. So if you're in a 3-block radius of a school and there's another school next to you, there should be some encouragement that those schools, regardless of their category, they should be working together. And I think that's the beginning of improving how we can make schools better, but also maybe sharing more information with the community. Like I said earlier, a lot of us who are maybe not parents any longer of school age kids don't have a clue about what's happening in those school buildings. And that's got to change if we're going to improve education in our community.
Okay, thank you. There's a question in the chat. What is the most pressing challenge facing Harlem?
Affordability and equity. Harlem is still largely a poor community, and I think more needs to be done to address that population, but also issues around quality of life needs to be more of a community discussion. I'm always alarmed about the amount of litter and literally how people will leave downtown, clean streets, and they would come uptown and throw trash to the sidewalk. Or you will have people just actually spitting out in the air doing covert. And it's just so, to me, there seemed like there's not really a strong education program around sanitation and how filthy streets and those kind of behavior really creates a whole negative sense of how people look at their environment. And so I want to maybe use that as something that can just bring us all together in terms of how do we create a healthy environment also for ourselves. And at the same time, when it comes to local businesses, I want to make sure that local community residents have a chance and get the support to open local businesses. There's not enough done to move people out of poverty, to move people into better positions in the community where they have a sense of ownership. And I want to create more ownership by community residents for the businesses, as well as move people from rent to home ownership.
Okay, so that'll segue into another question that came in. There's a lot of new buildings going up in Harlem. How many of these new buildings offer low-income housing?
I couldn't tell you that number, but I can surmise and I can guess. Based on the number of buildings that I've passed and inquired about, very few of those buildings are offering affordable housing. And I mean, not just to people below the poverty line. I'm just talking about regular working people. They cannot even afford to rent any of those units. Anytime now you got kids coming home, graduating from college and coming back to Harlem, and they're nationally a source for leadership, they're told that a studio apartment is over $2,000 a month. You know, and so because of the cost of housing, it's not allowing a whole new group of young people with certain skills to return to Harlem to be able to address some of the systemic problems that the community face. And so therefore that group of young people with that education, those tools, are told there's no place for them to return.
Okay. Another question. How are you going to get city resources to Harlem beyond Harlem being a site of services that are deemed undesirable elsewhere? For example, the Triangle north of 125th Street and east of Fifth Avenue has been shouldering more than our share of those services: sanitation, M10, and the M11 next to residential buildings, drug treatment, oversaturation next to schools, etc.
It's funny. I've been having a series of meetings with residents, what they call the East Harlem Triangle. God rest her soul, Alice Carnegie, who was the visionary for that area of Harlem. You got Miss Bertie Glenn, who's president of the Jackie Robinson houses. You got David Tate, who's the president of the Community Association of East Harlem Triangle. I've been meeting with them on a regular basis, but I've known these people most of all my life. And right now, that section that you mentioned is not only suffering the environmental challenges, they don't even have a supermarket. They have to walk 10 or more blocks just to get some food. And so imagine if you were a senior citizen, this is really a horrible situation. And so one of the things I've been sharing with people, our community boards need to become better resource with outreach and education. We need to make sure that the members of all these community boards truly reflect the entire community, not just a couple of blocks. And that therefore we can gather these voices and really come up with a solid needs assessment of the community, making sure that every 5 to 10 blocks ought to have certain things, and particularly a supermarket. And that's when the city can step in and maybe do subsidized commercial rent to ensure that there's some basic services that got to exist and that the city has to commit to that. You know, if the city doesn't do that, then nobody will be able to afford to open up any business because the rent is just too high, it's just too unaffordable.
You mentioned about, the filthy conditions that you see on the streets. From my opinion, there are several individuals out on the streets that are needing of mental care.
Yes.
They're not in their right mind.
Yes.
And what's going to happen with that? I mean, you go to 125th Street and Lexington Avenue, and it is just horrific. And it doesn't seem to be getting any better. What can you tell us about anything that can be done?
I'm so glad you said that. I live in Graham Court, right? My building is located at West 116th Street, West 117th Street, and Adam Creek Power Boulevard. We had a Triangle Park right across my building where most of that population that you mentioned had gathered. When the park was closed, that population took camp and surrounded our building. And I got to see things close and personal. And I began to say to myself, how did this happen? When I was a kid growing up in Harlem, you know, I saw drug addiction and I saw a lot of things, but in this case, I see drug addiction matched with a mental health crisis. And I'm saying to myself, I'm an academic, and I say to myself, what is causing this? There has to have been some breakdown in our safety net that now have caused all these people to appear with these myriad problems. Some people tell me it's the K2 drug that now have people mummified, where they literally are laying across the sidewalk or taking a dump in public, and literally have taken over bus stops where our seniors came and sit down to catch the bus. And so I think the city has a mental health crisis, and that we really got to say that. We got to say that New York has a mental health crisis. It's now visible in all of our communities, but largely communities like Harlem, and that we need to have a real discussion and address that. And we realize that the city cannot do it itself. It's going to take federal and state involvement to address this issue. And it could be a matter of insurance in terms of a single health payer, in terms of making sure that people are getting the right kind of medical attention. It's looking at medical institutions, how they treat that population. It's looking at the social services safety net programs in terms of whether or not they're doing what they're doing. And I know so many young folks after George Floyd said, let's defund the police. I'm saying that we need to better fund services that can also address this particular population, because arresting them and further marginalizing them is not going to cause it to disappear. It's going to take really a solid community, government, and private efforts to really make sure that we exercise some degree of care and seriously address this issue. And it's not about people bringing more programs in the community without community involvement, because I believe in fair share. You know, it's about saying to ourselves, how do we want certain services and programs to look in our community from the time the person arrived to that facility 3 to 5 blocks away, and 3 to 5 blocks away once they depart from that facility. All these kind of things should be in the plan of how people access these services. And I don't think that's been done. And that's why when you go to 125th Street and Lexington Avenue, you know, you feel like you're in a different country. It's to me, it's one of the worst things you could ever see, where a large amount of people have not been served. And it affects all of us who wants to stay in a diverse community, affordable community. It puts an unnecessary strain on our own health, mentally and otherwise, because I have an aging mother, and often I don't want her to even go anywhere without me escorting her. And so she should be free as an adult to feel safe in her community. And right now, many of our elderly, they're not feeling safe at all.
That is so true. Thank you for that. Someone else had asked a question about how do you get the people to use the programs and the housing, and I think you somewhat answered that, but we do need your support to champion this for this community.
Yes. I want to create a pathway that we all can be champions. As a city council person, you appoint the members of the community boards. You have to come up with, the community boards have to come up with some, going down. But can we get on? The community boards have to become the town council. You know, it has to be the place that we can discuss these serious issues and come up with some recommendations and some solutions. We sit in Harlem, and Columbia University is right there. City College is right there. Why are we not getting their input to some of these social economic challenges? These huge institutions that's getting huge research grants. Why do we not have a better partnership between our organizations and those academic institutions. I mean, Columbia certainly owes Harlem a great deal when they expanded their property all up through Harlem. And I just want to see them become a part in helping us to really have a real solid discussion about resources and best pathway in terms of how to deal with some of these issues. And I don't think that's happened. And I also think that the community boards have to be more about also outreach and education. I just don't want to see people sitting on the community board and all they're doing is taking the information for themselves. They need to be able to be part of the folks that help to recruit and engage other neighbors in the whole process and the whole discussion.
Someone asked that they appreciate your letting us know your knowledge on the issues of the quality of life concerns, but how will you address it when elected to the city council?
I would keep the community fully informed. I would see the community boards like a board of directors or a board of trustees, where I would see they are the partners in government, that you need to be able to bring things to them and ideas. Hey, there's a couple of bills that's being presented this week. I need you to review them and to help me hold public hearings to get proper input. Also, out of the community boards, I want to see the proposed legislation. You know, I want to see ideas that helps to improve our community coming through those local community boards.
Okay, thank you. Here's another question for me. Bail reform, what's your thoughts on that?
Bail reform is pretty much a state legislature issue. You know, criminal justice laws is really the state responsibility, but as a city of our kind, we can have a voice in that process. And as you know, the bail historically in our country, and particularly even in our region throughout other regions, have been racist. You know, it has not been fair, and it's caused, because it's functioned as a business, it has hurt a lot of people and a lot of families. I mean, I keep thinking of the young man who was incarcerated for stealing a book bag. And then subsequently, when he was released, he committed suicide. He should not be kept in jail. I mean, it's this horrible why communities don't have adequate, not only an adequate fair bail system, but an adequate system to access real legal counsel and advice. And, you know, and as a national crisis director for 3 years with Reverend Sharp, the National Action Network, I learned too much about these issues. And in families that found themselves caught in this whole process where they had to pay bail, and then a lawyer wanted like $25,000 to $30,000 retainer. I mean, it literally have wiped out poor and lower middle class families, even middle class family. You know, it's taken their home away. It's just horrible. And so the bail reform is something that we should also discuss as a community. There are very good groups that we can lean on to get solid research, like the Borough Institute of Justice is a great group. The Fortune Society, again, Columbia University has a strong criminal justice initiatives and programs in terms of getting their input. City University at John Jay has programs. So I would just like to see that we're making sure that all the right players and institutions are at the table when we're discussing policy and how it impacts our community, so we can get the best advice and direction from a whole host of people. Right now, it doesn't seem like we're doing that.
Thank you.
Mr. Allen?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Mark Moses. How are you?
Hey, Mark Moses, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I wanted to tell you that I've been involved in something called the Moran Center, which stems out of Evanston, Illinois. And it was just what you talked about, trying to decrease the pipeline to prison. And what this program does is gets together and they have fundraisers each year for free legal services for troubled youth. And
I love this.
It's been very, very successful. It's branched out where some of my friends, a few of them, one of them had been to prison as one of the mentors. And
wow.
he helped, it's expanded so that they then reach into the families and help these kids beyond even legal services. And it keeps
Wow.
growing and growing and growing. And John Lewis was one of the MCs there to raise money, and so was Eric Holder, and so was I. And it's raised money, and it's been, if you can find volunteer lawyers to volunteer their services for this, which I think is possible, it really does help. And just like you said, it started off with a young man who was incarcerated and hung himself in prison because he was there for 3 days without any representation. So it might be an idea to think about.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just spent, like I said, I spent time as the National Crisis Director for Reverend Sharpton at National Action Network. And I was responsible for 40 states. And when I first got there, they really didn't have any good system in place. And part of my job was, because Reverend Sharpton was getting all these calls for help. And so I had to create a system. And I just wish before I left there, I knew about your program. Because quite a number of folks from all over the place was calling me. I'm talking about all across the country.
Right. It's a good model. I think I've been in use for like 25 years now. So it has.
Oh, wow.
It's expanded, and it's been good. And you can get, and if people that are lawyers have the extra time to put in, it's a great thing.
You know what I want to say, Mark? Part of the issue, I always tell people, Harlem is resource rich and coordination poor. But what I learned from working at National Action Network, other communities across the country like Harlem suffer the same paradigm. There's resources, but the coordination is so poor that people don't know it exists. And that's something that we really got to figure out how to really tighten up. One of the things I've been saying to the Black churches when I was with Reverend Sharpton was I asked every Black church to maybe have a crisis liaison committee or someone in the congregations that's close to the pastor who can be identified to help distribute resources in the community in which those churches are located. So thank you for that.
No, it's
So, William, I want to just ask a question of my own. You probably know that all of the sanitation vehicles, trucks, et cetera, sweepers, et cetera, for Community Board 10 are actually parked in Community Board 11's district under Park Avenue at 132nd and 131st Street. And in addition, we are about to have the CB11 district garage move from 99th Street and 1st Avenue up into our neighborhood. One of the things that has frustrated us as a block association has been that the city council leaders have not pushed adequately enough with the mayor and with their colleagues on city council to fight for a state-of-the-art combined and enclosed facility. Because right now, right next to Lincoln houses, there are going to be 2 open-air sanitation garages. And you know, and I know, asthma is a serious impediment to the health, the well-being, and even the financial ability of children growing up in areas next to high particulate zones. And with everything from the 3rd Avenue Bridge to the Harlem River Drive to these 2 sanitation facilities, there is really a problem of asthma in that area, as you well know. Can you talk a little bit about your vision for these 2 open air sanitation facilities going forward?
Yes. And it's the same answer I given before. I mean, we all know the price that our community pay for the siting of such facilities. And this is where our community boards have to be better resourced. So therefore they can do the proper outreach and education and do better at civic engagement. right? I mean, if it wasn't for you, Greater Harlem Coalition coming into existence, a lot of the issues that you're now discussing would probably have never been on the public agenda. And so it takes an enlightened citizenry to raise these issues. And this is why I said with City University in the community, at Columbia in the community, we just imagine as an elected official, you serve a community that's civically engaged. And so therefore, when you then go down to your legislative body, you go down there because you've been directed by your community. And then your community are asking you the hard questions and giving you hard direction. Right now, those of us in Harlem, in terms of elected officials, I don't think that the direction's been that hard. And I think, I mean, the fact that you can have someone sitting currently in the city council and is not on any committee and is ranked 51 of 51 is an indication that as citizens and as residents, we have not done enough to say that's unacceptable. So my commitment is to do any and everything to make our voices stronger and to hold elected officials and anybody that represents us fully accountable. And we create transparency. You know, I always used to tell people, you know, you have folks, you know, sometimes it used to be a running joke. People in Harlem, they just wanted to see their elected officials at a funeral or a wedding or at a bus stop, but they never know exactly what they were doing in their legislative bodies. As long as they showed up at something, we were good, but no one asked, where was the minutes for the city council meeting? Let me see the congressional record, what actually took place. We wasn't really asking the hard question. Well, now it comes time for our community to be fully politically educated on what these folks are doing in those bodies. And so therefore we can get really adequate reports. And so that's my commitment. But I'll still make the weddings and the funerals and the bus stop too.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Sean, I don't see any more in the chat.
Yeah, I think, Holly, the last one was just from Mary. There she writes, holding community. So William, somebody has written that she's just concerned about holding community boards accountable and to be more transparent and providing information. Can you just tell us a little bit about your vision for who you will be looking for in selecting or appointing or approving community board members?
I would want to create a committee across. I want to create a hiring committee of different folks that will address this mission I have in terms of total civic engagement. And I would ask them to review with me the type of people that we're looking for and get them involved in the process. You know, of course, groups like Greater Harlem Coalition. There might be blockers like your group, the Harlem Block Association. There might be folks that's active in senior programs, small businesses, some kind of panel that really interviews people. So therefore we can constantly making sure that we're getting the folks that's really going to not just be there for themselves, but be there for the greater community. That's the process I want to put in place. Right now, it just seems like people are disappointed because they know somebody and this and that. But to me, it got to be a little bit more strategic than that if we're going to address these issues and be successful.
All right, there's a question in the chat. Is it possible to have community board elected equitably from each sector of the district to assure that there is geographic equity?
Yeah, that's up to the city council person and the borough president, you know, and someone who's endorsed me in this race, who's running for borough president, he and I have been talking about this whole process. That's Brad Holman. And he's committed to changing how the board members are chosen. And he's actually accepted 99% of my ideas about it. And he felt that these boards are an essential part of helping to manage a neighborhood. You know, when Jane Jacobs wrote the book, The Life and Death of American Great Cities, she talked about this notion of community-centered city administration. And that the sole purpose was for civic engagement, and that the citizen, the resident, is the ultimate person that needs to be involved in this process because they're the ones receiving the services or the lack of services. So if they're thoroughly engaged and that they're sharing the information with their neighbors throughout, then we truly are going to have better participation. Right now in Board 10 area, I've been telling people, it seems like the only people that serve on the board come from like 2 or 3 blocks. Going down.
So, William, I want to just take a moment now to thank you so much for taking some time out during your campaigning this evening to talk to the Harlem Neighborhood Block Association. If you could put your campaign website into the chat, that would be awesome. If not, just remind me by sending it to me tomorrow and I'll get it out to the group. I just want to thank you once again so much for coming by. We wish you all the best and
thank you so much.
And look forward to this and have a great evening.
You too. I appreciate it. Thank you for your time and thank you for being good neighbors.
All right. Thank you. And I'd like to now pivot over to Eric Adams, who I met a couple of months ago, and have to say that I thoroughly enjoyed my time talking and walking with him and bringing him over to East Harlem, walking along East 125th Street. We walked all the way over to Lexington Avenue and the Pathmart station. So he's certainly been in the community. He, as you know, is a candidate for mayor. And Eric, I was wondering if you could just briefly introduce yourself, and then we'll open it up to a couple of questions and go from there.
Oh, thank you very much. And, you know, as you can imagine, I have this little project going on. So I'm all over the city as we are running to really not to become mayor, but really to save the city. I want my city back. And I'm pretty sure many of you want the same. And we're watching just an erosion of quality of life. And my perspective is really different from a lot of the candidates that are running. We need to build out long-term plans. That's called prevention, but we have to deal with intervention. What are we doing now? What are we doing now about the homeless men and women, or homeless men for the most part, that are dropped from Randall's Island right onto First Avenue? When I walk the streets up from going all the way from First Avenue over to Lenox, over to the Whole Foods, I'm watching the oversaturation of drug treatment clinics. We're seeing just an erosion of the quality of life of the city. And I'm just not going to allow my son to grow up in the city that I grew up in. And I'm committed to that. And I'm not going to do what's popular or just go by based on a soundbite. The prerequisite to prosperity is public safety and justice. We could have both. We don't have to trade off the justice we deserve for the safety we need. And as the mayor of the city of New York, we're going to bring back a level of civility that is needed in the city. We have a city now where you have open defecation, open urination, open drug use right in front of our schools, RVs driving on sidewalks. People are just doing whatever they desire to do. And that is not how you live in a city with diverse cultures, languages, and groups. And this is an important point for us and moment for us, I believe. And our city is dysfunctional. And many people don't believe this city can function. I know it could function. I used my technology and the skills as a computer programmer back during the early 90s to create the first of its kind using data to take policing from being reactive to proactive to what we call predictive. And although the police department has a lot of things that it must do, we were able to deal with crime. We were able to take those 2,000 homicides a year, 98,000 robberies, the equivalent amount of felonious assaults. We were able to turn around the city. And if you folks live in Harlem, like I do in Bed-Stuy, my property values benefited from a safe city, just as you are benefiting at the same time. We can't go backwards. And we need to stop being dysfunctional as a city. Cities are made up of agencies. And if those agencies are siloed and if they create conflicts for each other, then no matter how much money you put in the city as taxpayers, you're going to continue to get an inferior product. That is what we do every day. We have become accustomed to the dysfunctionality of this city. Let me conclude with this. Archbishop Desmond Tutu has a quote that I love and live by. We spend a lifetime pulling people out of the river. No one goes upstream and prevent them from falling in the first place. We have professionalized hanging out downstream and allowing people to be pulled out of drug use, pulled out of homelessness, lack of education, crime, all of these issues that we're seeing, we create them in this city. I don't join my colleagues that are running for mayor when they call for the legalization of crack cocaine, the legalization of heroin, the legalization of fentanyl. I'm not going to have my son grow up in the city that I grew up in, and I'm going to remain clear about that. I want my city back, and I'm going to bring my city back.
Well, thank you very much for that. So I want to just open it up to see if people put into the chat or just unmute yourself and feel free to ask Erica a question. Holly, do you want to take the one in the chat?
Yes, there is a question that says, what are the innovations that will lead to growth in the economy? What is the future for New York City economically?
That's a great question. The prerequisite of prosperity is public safety. No one is going to open a business here. No one is going to come for tourism. If you have 3-year-old children shot in Times Square, if you have tourists shot at Grand Central Station, we are hemorrhaging employment, and we have created this division. 65,000 people in this city pay 51% of our income taxes. They are only 2% of our income tax filers. And so we have candidates that are saying, so what if they leave or not? I don't subscribe to that. No, we need you here. We have to get out of this together. And then we have to get our city back up and operated. I need my accountant back in the office space so he can feed into our financial ecosystem. Go to the theater, go to the restaurant, go down to that Dunkin' Donut where that low pay employee is trying to move into the middle class. Then we need to get COVID under control. We must get to herd immunity by reaching those communities that are reluctant to actually take the vaccine. It's imperative that we get COVID under control. And then we need to go after our small businesses. That first round of PPP did not hit the ground. It went to large corporations. It did not go to the small, as we call micro businesses, the mom and pop businesses. We need to have a direct pathway for them. 51% of our employees come from small businesses. We need to give them backroom support. We need to make sure that we have built out a local banking network such as CDFIs to give them access to capital, and then rethink how we use our procurement dollars. We're spending almost $22.5 billion of procurements for goods and services outside our city. That makes no sense. We need to be going to our small businesses here in our city and particularly lean into those communities where COVID hit the hardest, Black, brown, minority businesses, and use our buying power so they can leverage it for greater access to capital and keep their businesses open.
If I can ask a follow-up question to that, in particular, Borough President Adams, Rasan Harris, I'm the CEO of Citizens Committee for New York City, and we recently did a neighborhood business small grant, micro granting program, just for the very reason that you said, that communities can't come back if our neighborhood businesses can't thrive. One of the things that we highlighted was people innovating so that they can survive past COVID. So my second part of my question is, what are some of the things that we learned about business that we can pivot to make best practice post-COVID?
Well, there are many things that we learned. Number one, our online services and access to goods, access to everything from deliveries. Hey, we have folks now that are delivering their toothpaste through Amazon. These small businesses are hurting. And so I'm a big believer as if you look at my 100 plus steps forward for New York City, and I really encourage people to look at that on my website. We should have tax-free Tuesdays to encourage people to visit our local businesses. We should also really use our Chamber of Commerce to do the backroom work for businesses, everything from their accountant to their administration. If you are a bakery, I want you selling your goods. I don't want you to spend a substantial amount of time doing the back room work, having to deal with regulation, the bureaucracy. New York is too expensive, too bureaucratic, and too difficult to do business in. That's why we're losing so many businesses. And then my plan of the My City card. My City card, I have a computer background. I'm a big tech guy. My City card will tell a business, register with one agency, one time, based on your information. We will navigate your information throughout the entire city and other agencies that you need using a single platform. So you're not taking time out trying to deal with the bureaucracy of our city. And then we have to get our businesses up and operating on how to access and move from a small business, a micro business, into a larger business by giving the necessary support to do so. And the art of doing business in New York is evolving and changing. I personally believe people are going to return to the experience of being in our micro businesses.
Thank you.
But we're not there now.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
Eric, if I can ask you a question, the future of commercial space is very much up in the air right now. And I'm always shocked at how many new large buildings with massive amounts of commercial space are being proposed. Do you have any sense of what you think we should be thinking about as a city in terms of an immediate and long-term plan in terms of the use of commercial space versus something like residential or industrial?
Businesses, we're going to see a shrink in footprints. We know that. We know there's some businesses that are not going to come back to their full scope of having their employees operating out of a commercial space. And so I believe we need to reimagine these spaces. Number one, we should utilize many of the retail spaces on the ground level. We should use them for universal childcare, 0 to 3. Nothing would do us a greater good than having parents, if they work in the central business district or even out, to be able to have their children downstairs in the child care. We can give real tax incentives if landlords pass those savings on to the parents who are looking for child care. Nothing gets in the way of a woman moving through employment or moving through a company, increasing her viability in the company than child care. And we should use it as health centers. We need to localize our health networks to make sure that people have access to adequate health care on a local level. We learned that from COVID-19.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Go
Yes,
for it,
ma'am.
Kat.
Hi. You spoke a little bit about policing in your opening remarks, and I was hoping you could now speak a bit more in detail about what your point of view is on policing and how what your vision would be for what policing would be here in the city going forward.
Well, we have to redefine the ecosystem of public safety. And we have to clearly identify the role that police will play in that entire ecosystem. Right now, when we think of public safety, we only think police. That is wrong. So we have to rebuild the trust. We rebuild the trust by expeditiously removing abusive officers. No more 4 years when you have a Pandaleo case. No, within 6 months, fair trial. But if your actions are determined to be something that you violated your role as a police officer, within 6 months, you need to be out of that agency. Second, we need to be more forward and proactive. Let's not talk about how do we respond to crime. We need to talk about how do we prevent crime. There's a reason that 30% of the inmates at Rikers Island are dyslexic, because we're not doing dyslexia screening in every school to give that baby what they need. There's a reason that 55% have learning disabilities, because we're not giving the services that is needed. There's a reason that foster care children age out at 21 are more likely to be the victim of crime or participate in crime, and only 21% graduate from high school, because we're not allowing them to age out at 26. So I say, let's use the money we save in policing, not defund, but to make them more efficient and be proactive to build out real community groups, crisis management team, have our young people involved, do what I'm doing now, sit down with gang members to get them out of gangs so that we can prevent crime and not just respond to crime and change the ecosystem of public safety.
Thank you.
I have to bounce to another Zoom. I'm Zooming my life away.
This is no surprise, Eric. I'm surprised you still have a voice left. Listen, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time out this evening to visit our block association. It's been so great to watch your campaign. Wish you all the best in it, and we'll be there on the 22nd.
Thank you. Take care. Good to see you all.
Okay, Eric. Take care. Bye-bye. So that, I think, wraps it up for this evening, unless anyone has got anything, an announcement or anything else you want to bring up.
Can I ask a question? So first off, Sean, I just wanted to really thank you for bringing so many of the mayoral candidates here to our group. I found it very helpful to have that exposure. And I just remain in kind of awe of, you're able to get all kinds of people here in our midst. So I really appreciate that. My question is, I saw today, I guess it was today in the New York Times, that they are endorsing Catherine Garcia as their, pick for mayor or for the mayor position. And I guess I'm just kind of curious to the group. I mean, I felt like that was a little out of left field for me, and I don't really know much about that candidate. So I'm just kind of curious if anybody in the group has much of a perspective on who that person is.
I will just jump in here for 1 second, Kat. So just this evening, an HNBA member who lives in my household was encouraging me to think about Catherine Garcia as a potential guest for our upcoming June meeting. So what I have found as somebody who's been organizing these, as you can imagine, back in November and December, et cetera, everybody and their cousin wanted to come and visit us and talk with us because they had time and they wanted exposure. It's getting increasingly difficult. They are super overbooked. They want to see large groups, but nevertheless, I think it's important. So I will try, just as an aside, in the next few days to see if I can reach out to Catherine to see if she'd be willing to come to our June meeting. It's a little tough with scheduling these people because our block association meetings come on a schedule at a certain time, et cetera. But as with Eric, he was able to fit in 15 minutes between one meeting and another meeting. I will say that having met Catherine Garcia under the auspices of the Greater Harlem Coalition, I will just say she's incredibly brilliant, very accomplished. She was, just thoughtful and very inquisitive. She seemed to have very creative solutions. I thought she was awesome. I personally have been very excited about this electoral slate this year because I think there are a lot of very strong candidates. I might prefer one over the other, or for this reason or for that reason, but I think that we have a very strong group of contenders, and I think this city will do fine, whoever we end up with. And I think there's certainly an interesting series of choices there. Anyway, I've been talking too much, so maybe somebody else has a thought about Catherine or beyond.
No, I was just going to mention that she was the former commissioner of the New York City Sanitation Department, if you didn't know. I was just going to mention that. because we saw her when we were, making our petition about the sanitation department pulling up those open air facilities in our area. Carrie and I went down and sat in on that meeting, and she was there.
Okay.
And I will also add that her current chief of staff for her campaign, Monica, was the representative that DSNY sent to East Harlem to talk to community representatives, including Carrie and myself, about the M11 and M10 garages. So when Catherine Garcia decided to throw her hat in the ring, I was immediately struck by the fact that she chose this very talented and thoughtful woman, Monica, to be her chief of staff. So they have very, very strong connections to East Harlem and knowledge of our community.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Certainly.
I'll do my own research. I was just curious.
Oh, we can help you out.
Oh, and I will just draw your attention to the chat. William, who's was on the call earlier today, has put in his phone number in case you have any follow-up questions you want to reach out to him for, as well as his email address and the website address of his campaign there. So thank you very much for that, William. And just to conclude, I want to thank Halia for having set the Zoom up and gotten this all organized. And also special thanks to Rasan Harris, who is our neighbor up on 131st Street. Citizens Committee worked with Halia and myself today and earlier to get this streaming out on YouTube Live, which is being currently done. And we got some training from them as well. And Citizens Committee is just an awesome organization. Rasan, if you could just throw the website address of Citizens Committee into the chat in case anyone wants to learn more about your amazing organization, that'd be great.
So I put in the information there. It talks about our grant making process, the little orientation video, and the website should be there. Once you get to the website, you also be able to sign up to get on our mailing list. In summary, there are power in numbers, and we are a mighty organization that has the opportunity to talk to thousands of leaders across New York City. And you guys, what you're doing, being civically engaged, is what makes the city thrive. So thank you so much. Sign up, tell your friends to apply for grants. And we'd love to partner anytime that we can uplift these types of conversations to the broadest audience possible. Like, we're here for it. So thank you for all that you're doing. You guys are awesome.
Well, on that note, I don't think we could top that. So we'll just, we'll leave it there. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. And I will send details about the upcoming June meeting. But as always, it's the second Tuesday of the month, 7 p.m. Be there, be square. And have a great evening. Take care, everyone.
Thank all of you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.